a lot of like what you're doing, what you're up to, how you're connecting with them, it all answers those questions. And that's what I think like purpose does for us in our lives. It answers questions to things that we find very complex. We don't know how to answer them. Like, what do I do right now? Well, what's your purpose? What what impact are you trying to create? What change are you trying to make in the world?
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte,
exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
All right, it's another day of podcasting, Evan. We hit the record button and here we go. Okay, this one is a artist wisdom series. Something Evan and I like to do every now and then because, well, there's a number of reasons. One, I'll be honest with you. Sometimes we don't got anything personally that we feel we can really start with that is really getting us going. So we look to a wise person out there who maybe said something interesting that we relate to or connect with, and then we try to run with it, explore it, see what happens. And we got a good one. We always pick a good one. This is another good one. This one is, here, I'll read the quote. The quote is this: "Man can only find meaning for his existence in something outside himself." And that's by Viktor E. Frankl. He wrote a great book, Man's Search for Meaning. Evan and I have both read it. I highly recommend it. I think it's a great book. I think if you're looking for purpose in your life, or if you find yourself suffering, it's a great book to read. Everybody has that search for purpose and everybody suffers. So this book is relevant for every person. But the idea of the book, so you kind of understand what's going on, was he was in a camp during, he was a Jewish person in the camp and everybody was dying around him and it looked like his life was over, and what do you live for? And he found that people who didn't find a sense of meaning or purpose, they usually were the ones that would die. And for him to find purpose and meaning in a horrible situation like that was very challenging. And the book gets into a lot of his struggle and his challenges with that and his experiences, but it's very relevant for today. One thing I think it really kind of resonates is we all suffer, but most of us hopefully never suffer like that. And if you ever suffer like that, how could you ever find meaning? So I think if he can find meaning in a situation like that, then we can all look and go, well, you know what? My life isn't that bad. So maybe it's not going to be, if he can do it, then I can do it. Right. So anyway, I think it's an interesting quote to start the day with, Evan. So I'm going to pass it on to you. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah. I mean, it feels good to be bringing in Viktor Frankl. I think that's one of the other things I love about these, not just because, sometimes we are stuck. Sometimes we're just at a stuck place and we need something with some juice to it. And that can be a component, but there's also a component to which I like doing these ones because it's like we're bringing another person into the room. In a way, it's like we're invoking the person whose words who said these words or wrote these words and inviting them into the space with us to just sort of really dive into it, dissect it, and draw things out. And with Viktor Frankl, I mean, we looked at I don't know how many different Viktor Frankl quotes. It just seemed like, let's do Frankl. And it's like looking at his quotes and how many amazing quotes there are from him out there. And so many of them come from Man's Search for Meaning. It's like, and I remember, I have to reread it now. I have to go back and reread it because it is one of those books where it feels like almost every single page is a mic drop kind of there's a mic drop moment in it. He says something so insanely profound that if we really absorbed truly like what he was saying, like your whole life would change if you really fully grasped some of the things that he was saying, just one of them, and yeah, he definitely, he talks a lot about suffering for sure because of how much he went through and how much he saw other people going through. And I think that I'm glad that you brought in some of who he is for people who don't know and where he comes from, because I think it is so important. I think in before we even talk about some of the things he said, of understanding that thing of where he comes from. And he was a psychotherapist as well. Before he went into the camp, and he continued afterwards, and his entire practice changed as a result of what he went through. And where there's even a quote that we came across where he said, Freud said it's all, we're all about pleasure, and I can't remember who else it was said that it was all about power, but really a human being's life is about meaning and our quest for meaning, and how suffering is very often one of the greatest catalysts for discovering what that thing is, because you can endure so much suffering when you have a sense of meaning and purpose. And so these are just a few. I feel like I kind of wanted to just run through some of these other ones because I think that they're also will lend themselves into this conversation. But coming back to the quote that we're getting into for this one specifically, which is that our meaning can't be about ourselves, right? Our meaning has to be about something outside of us. And I think that what makes it an interesting quote is that I think that there's a way of interpreting that, which I don't agree with, but there's a way of interpreting it that I completely agree with. And that might be something worth tackling on the outset here.
What's the way you agree?
Well, so it's like, because your meaning is still very much knowing what that meaning is still, there's an internal process to that thing. No one can tell you what the meaning of your life is, right? Not directly, right? So there's still a sense of, you have to discover that within you, right? Of what that thing is. But the meaning of every human being's life being something that's beyond them, that's beyond this small self, for lack of a better term. You've got to be about something that extends out, that connects out into the world, right? That's in relationship to the world. It can't just be, it's all about me, which is what I think that he is actually saying in this thing. But I've rambled a number of things. So Brandon, why don't you take it away?
Well, purpose is a big thing to look at. I mean, I think in some ways, some of the biggest things, they're actually really simple, but it's difficult to get to them, to get to the core of them, and not to get distracted or, off course when you're looking at them. Things like purpose are like that, I think with purpose, our relationship to purpose, I think, evolves a little bit with our maturity. I don't know if this is true or not. I mean, I just kind of look at my own journey with purpose and how much I was consciously aware of it and unconsciously aware of it, and how much I thought I knew what I was going for and what I was actually going for. They were, I don't know if I was always clear on that. So I think if you would ask me at certain times in my life, I might have told you that my purpose was something that wasn't actually what it was, but I might have believed that it was that. And I think this is one of the challenges with purpose, is that, in some ways, maybe at first it can be, maybe not at first, maybe at certain times, it can be out of some type of personal gain or some type of personal thing we're going for. I remember when I was younger, I just, I think I wanted to prove to everybody that I could be more than I was given credit for, and that I could be somebody, and that, and I think that I wanted to get things, like I wanted to get approval, and I wanted to get, admiration and recognition, and I wanted to get those things. But if you only look at it that far, you've only gone skin deep, because really, if you look deeper, the real reason driving all of that was always there. It was like, well, I want to feel loved, right? So it's just like this deeper thing that I never would have said, but that was really kind of, because it's like I felt unloved, and so I felt like I wasn't good enough to have love. And that probably has a lot to do with, you can go into history of why is that, why do you exist, why do you have that issue or that challenge, and you can start to figure out why that might be there. But even that, and you go, okay, well, now I'm after love. It's like, okay, well then, if you get to the point where you feel loved, then you're not going to have any more purpose anymore, because purpose can't end at love. By the way, you already, like, the getting access to love is not as complicated as we think it is. But when you feel unloved, when you have never gotten attention, or, maybe you didn't get the proper care or whatever as a kid, whatever it might be, you might think that it's this very elusive thing because it wasn't given freely in your household or whatever, or your childhood. Where some people, they don't struggle with that so much, not the same way, because, they might have grown up in a place where, love was poured upon them, and attention and affection and care and all of that. So they're like, what's the deal? Like, what do you even care? Because they take it for granted, because they don't know what it's like to not have that. And they weren't neglected, and they weren't, maybe abused or whatever. So when you get past your initial trauma of search for meaning, then and especially if you like heal that, or you realize that that's not really what it's about, then it becomes about something else. Something that I've been investigating, and I haven't really got to an answer here yet, but I'll share it because I think it's relevant. It's part of the reason why I'm called to this conversation, is that something that I found when I was about 15 or 16. I think it started when I was 15, and then it really kind of blossomed around 16, and then it kind of, like, my life took a turn. So, not to get into too much story, but right around 14, like, my parents, we had a mansion, we had all the money in the world, it seemed. I had this perfect family that my parents were married for like 26 years, and, everything seemed really good, it seemed successful, all this. And then, like, almost overnight, it seemed like, everything just went to shit. They got divorced, they split up, they both had to declare bankruptcy. I went from living in a mansion to living in a trailer park. My whole life changed. And losing the money and the things and all the nice stuff, that actually, I remember that didn't really bother me, not even really in the slightest. I actually almost didn't even care about that. But what was so hard for me was that my parents splitting up, and just trying to make sense of that, because, like, my whole world didn't make sense anymore, because, I thought I came from this family that was really good, and everything, it was working. And then suddenly to kind of realize, no, it's not working. In fact, it's working so poorly that, like, your whole world just gets shook upside down. And then I was kind of like left alone. And, I always find things in my life, at least, have come in, like, multiple things happen at once. It's not just the parents split, but right around that time, my best friend, we were kind of maturing into high school, and we were kind of parting ways, and that was very difficult. And there was, like, just a lot of aloneness. My brothers, one of my brothers was going off to, the island to go to university. My other brother was going across the country to work. So I was just left alone, and my best friend wasn't really in my life. And then my parents were split, and they didn't have time for me, and my brothers were gone, and I was just alone, and nothing made sense. And it was just like, well, what do you do? And I started, what I would do is I would be home alone, and no one was giving me any attention. And so I would go to the movie theater, and I would watch movies, and I'd do that alone. And when I watched a movie, I felt this kind of sense of peace, and I felt this sense of, sometimes I'd be watching a character go through something that I felt I could relate to, and then I didn't feel so alone. And I was trying to make sense of the world. I started going to church. I was looking for things. I was just searching like religions and spirituality. I was just looking, I was searching, right? And then about a year of that, and then 16, I made a film. And it wasn't like I'm going to be a filmmaker. I just made a film. I got a bunch of my friends together at this camp that I was at, and I just wanted to make a film. So I borrowed my friend's mom's camera and then convinced everybody there at camp to make a film with me. And we did it over a week, and we showed it at like the talent festival, and it won the thing. And it was such a great experience. And like when we actually went to the talent festival, there was like 300 people in the audience. It was crazy. And everybody like really liked the film, and I'd like never done anything, but it was really genuine and authentic film. And I came home, and I remember just being like, I'm going to be a film director. That's what I'm going to do. And I found this purpose. But here's the thing. What I'm finding is that my sense of purpose comes from, I want to give people that experience that I had. When you're totally lost and you don't know how you can have what you want, and maybe you don't even know what you want. But one thing I'm good at because of that experience is just going, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to find a way to make it happen. And I love teaching and sharing that stuff with people. So there's something about inspiring people to create and find meaning in what they create that has something to do with purpose for me. So even though I might have used filmmaking and even acting and screenwriting and some of these other things to try to get recognition, affection, attention, love, and whatever, and those were my personal needs I was after, ultimately, I think what I'm trying to do is share that experience with people and help them have it too. And maybe there's another layer even deeper than that. I don't really know. But what I found about purpose is it's not always what's evident on the front. It's sometimes you have to dig and dig and dig. And, and as you mature, you start to realize, oh, I thought I had it. And you're like, no, it's deeper than what you thought. You thought you had it, but it's actually deeper than that.
Yeah, it's really a matter of becoming more and more intimate with what that thing is, because that initial thing could still very much be what it is, but it's just, again, it's that layers of intimacy that you begin to develop with that, where it becomes a much richer type of being, almost like a partner that you have in your life who, you start living with them and you start to learn all these things about them, and they start to teach things to you about yourself as well. I think it's often like that. It's not necessarily like, oh, my thing was wrong. I mean, I think that can happen, but I think very often it's like, oh no, it's just, you're working through these different stages of that relationship with the meaning of your life, which is, I mean, hell, that's one of the biggest things that you could say an artist is interested in, is exploring, like, meaning, like what is the meaning of our lives and ourselves and all of this. There's lots that you said that I was like, oh man, like my mind was going off in different kinds of tangents and directions. One thing that you said that I thought was really interesting is you brought up that in your story, you brought up something about love, and it just got me to thinking that meaning, I think, is perhaps one of like the deepest forms of love that we can experience, because of what it can endure, and because of what Viktor Frankl was saying, that it can endure, that essentially any level of suffering can be lived through, can be worked through, can be survived in some extent, if you have that connection, if you have that relationship, because that thing can always be active, no matter what your circumstances are, which is another one of his big things, and another quote that we didn't use, but him talking about how your circumstances don't really shape the person that you are, right? It's how you are within those circumstances that are a bigger factor in that whole equation. but I'm getting a little off of where I was going. There's something about this idea of love and meaning, or meaning as a very deep form of love that we in some ways are charged to discover and learn about ourselves because of its power, I think. And there was something else too that you were saying that struck me in some kind of way here. But I was thinking about our last podcast. We were talking about, storytelling versus content, like in the soul of storytelling, and this loss that there seems to be within so much of, a medium that we've, spent a lot of time in, and you talking about going to the theater on your own and seeing these stories that gave you something, that enriched something, that maybe that led to an activation of some of meaning in you, which is like, yeah, I mean, that's what art does in its highest forms. It speaks to us at those places. And I think that's, piggybacking a bit off of the last podcast, again, I think that's part of the problem with, the content, this barrage of content that we live with, not story, but content, just giving you content all the time. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's like, like content is like story without the meaning in a kind of way. And it's like, yeah, there's so much that's devoid of meaning. It's all about hitting pleasure centers, right? And that's another thing that Frankl talks about as well, which is that when we don't have a sense of meaning and purpose, we seek pleasure. I mean, he wrote this shit how long ago? Back in the 40s, I think. I mean, what he was saying is truer today than it was when he wrote it, in so many ways, or at least it hits a little bit harder today than I think it may have ever hit, because I see so much of that where it's this lack of meaning. So we seek pleasure, and instead of these mediums that we used to go to, these stories that we would go to that would help us gain some perspective on our life and ourselves and what this whole thing might be about, or even get us just even thinking about it a little bit. Instead, it's just fast food through the brain, just a quick hit to numb all of that stuff, but not give any real sustenance, and so I'm just thinking about this, to me, this apparent lack of meaning that exists within the mediums that are supposed to actually help us with that thing. I don't want to say that as like a blanket statement across the board, because there are people still doing great things in the arts and aiming to do those things, but it definitely seems to be hard to come by these days.
Yeah, well, I think the pursuit of pleasure is always a slippery slope in so many ways, and it's seductive. I mean, feels good. It feels good. I mean, that's until it doesn't. I think that's the problem. Also, the other thing is if you base your decisions based on how things feel, a purpose is always going to escape you, because anyone who lives their life just on how they feel, they're just trying to avoid feeling bad and only feel good, and they don't have anything else, like those are their highest forms of direction and guidance, you're in real trouble. And depression and sadness and all these horrible things are right around the corner for you always. And if you can't get out of depression, I'll tell you this because I went through it, and you have to get away from trying to feel good. Sometimes life just isn't going to feel good, and you have to accept that that's just part of life, and that that it's not always supposed to feel good, that some of it isn't supposed to feel good, and you start looking at the suffering and the struggle and the hurt as a good thing. And that's very hard to get your head around when you're all caught up in, I just want to feel good and I want to satiate and I want to get some type of, I want to get that hit of dopamine or whatever, right? So, you often can identify, if you stop and look at your life and you look at what you're doing, you can often see what's destroying it. Find that a lot of it feels good. Most of what's destroying your life feels really good. And it doesn't mean that what you're doing that feels good is bad, but it's how you're using it that is bad. Like video games to me feel really good. Sometimes I'm into them. Sometimes I'm not into them at all. I don't even care to play, but sometimes I'm really into them and all I want to do. But video games are not bad, but it is how I use video games that really makes a huge difference, because if I'm just indulging in them and I'm distracting myself from my life, or I'm avoiding a feeling of discomfort or pain, it always leads down the same path. It always leads to disgust and purposelessness and a feeling like, and there's also there's things that come with pursuing pleasure too much, like the consequences of atrophy, whether it be your muscles or your mind or even your emotional connection to yourself. It just atrophies. It just gets weak and frail, and then you lose connection to it. So something that I've been working on is I went through a big life change sometime around 30, 31, right around there. Big, massive. And I went through a depression. I went through kind of a difficult time, and it was really difficult and challenging to get through. And I share a bit about that on the podcast, and and every once in a while, I still go through these little bouts of it. I go, oh man, I hope I'm not going back there. That's fucking frightening. I thought I was done with this, but it'll poke its head up and it'll be kind of hey, I'm here. You're like, holy fuck, I thought we were done. I thought this was over. But what I find is that it pokes its head up when I try to go back to doing life how I did it before the depression happened. The depression that I went through was me recognizing that the way I was going through life was not working, and I was tired of it, and it was over, and it was all big fucking, not all of it, but most of it was a big bunch of bullshit. It was all a performance, and it was all an idea, and it wasn't all mine. And what I'm finding now is that there are patterns that get wired into us. I would say with me, so I'll just speak for myself because maybe someone can relate. But I do things sometimes today based on how I learned to do them as a kid. But they weren't mine, and they weren't necessarily good or healthy, but that's what I learned, and so that's what I sometimes think to do. And so then I go to do that. I go, oh, I know. You know what? I really like motorcycles. Let me get a nicer motorcycle. Let me get this better thing. Let me do this. Let me make more money. That'll do it, right? And it's no, none of that shit'll do it. That's all that's all just a byproduct of something else. But if you start to chase the surface of things after you've kind of especially after you've awoken, it becomes, the magic trick runs out quicker. At first, when you've never had anything, like you've never earned anything really cool and you've never really won anything really cool, the idea of winning it or getting it or achieving it seems so fucking amazing. It just you hear people go hey, getting everything you want won't make you happy. And you're like, yeah, fuck that. I'm going to go get it. I don't care about that. Maybe it just didn't work for you, but it's going to work for me, right? It's almost that arrogant kind of attitude, right? Not everybody has it, but some of us do. And there's a certain amount of okay, I'm going to go do it. Then you go do it. If you actually do it, it feels really great at first. Then it wears out and you go, shit, okay, maybe it wasn't that. Maybe I didn't have the whole picture. Maybe I need to get this too. And there's that thing. And what I found for me, when I started achieving a bunch of shit, I had my show, I had my money, I had the girlfriend, I had all this stuff. I was traveling the world, I was doing all this shit. I was spinning all these plates. And when all the plates were spinning and everything was working, it all seemed so fucking great. But then one plate starts to wobble and you're like, oh shit, and you're trying to fix that one, and then another one starts wobbling, and then you all of a sudden it's too many plates are wobbling and you can't recover, and then they all start crumbling down, and you start to realize, okay, well, what the hell, I had put it together, let me try and put that together. And you start to realize that was all just a distraction. It was all this, like, I was living up to this image, this idea of who I thought I was supposed to be. You're supposed to be wealthy, successful, have the girlfriend. You're supposed to be somebody. You're supposed to do all this stuff. And I did all this stuff. But you know what? I'll tell you something, Evan. It was probably when like one plate started wobbling. That was before everything crashed. I started to wake up because one day I came home. I remember it was a good day. I had a good day. I shared this story before. I had a good day. Came home, sat on the edge of my bed, and all of a sudden I had this, like, I just put my head in my hands and I started crying, and I was like, what the hell is going on? You have everything. You should be so happy. And I wasn't. And it dawned on me in that moment that I wasn't happy. And all the stuff that I was doing wasn't doing the trick. And that was one of the early stages of waking up to going, this isn't what it's about. But I had to go all that distance. And then things just start crumbling down, and you try to put them back up. You try to respin the plate again. You lose the girlfriend, you get a new girlfriend. It's even hotter, or whatever, even more popular or famous or whatever your thing is. You lose the money, you go get more money. You go do something bigger, And the thing is that it's not satisfying. The first time it was kind of satisfying, or at least they had the illusion of satisfaction, but then it starts to not be. And then that's where the depression comes in, because now you can't go, I can't fix this. I'm headed down a mudslide, and I cannot stop myself from heading to wherever the hell this is heading. And you keep trying to put the plates back up, and you might even put more plates up, and it doesn't do the fucking trick. And that's, and you can look at that and you go, that's horrible. What a horrible thing. Or you could look at it and go, what a gift. That was me getting to a point of awakening where I realized that spending my entire life, wasting my entire life, trying to spin plates to be somebody, to have some kind of life, to have some type of image of a life, was actually not what meaning and purpose was about. That's not what that 16-year-old kid was really after. And then it all crumbles, and eventually, when you let it all just fall down and then you try to pick up those pieces and rebuild it and figure out how to put it together, that's where like deeper sense of meaning starts to come from. And, I haven't figured it all out, but I have definitely figured out that some of what I was doing was a whole big bunch of bullshit. And I mean, I'm sure there's younger people in the audience who are still on that pursuit, and they go, yeah, whatever, I'm going to do it anyway. I get it, because that's how I was. So good luck. That's all I can say. But, if you can start to see the warning signs ahead of time, then maybe you can start to, maybe you don't have to go so far down the road and like, just, but I don't know. I mean, this is just something that I'm living.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in so many ways you head down that road, and coming back to that whole idea of hitting a little bit of suffering is when you really start to figure out what's really important to you, right? And so I think in the early stages, like you're talking about, you can get by for a little while on whatever fumes you're going on, because there's that, as you said, it's like it's new. There's novelty to things, and that's exciting. And especially when things seem to be working out, right? Like it's really exciting thing to do. But as time goes on, you keep doing that thing, it loses that freshness to it, right? It loses that new thing. That's very often where we find ourselves in a position of questioning what we're doing, why we're doing it, because it's like, oh, this had such a thing before, but now it doesn't. And it's like, well, yeah, because you were just on the surface of something, and that was fun. It was like when you're first in a relationship with somebody, like there's this heat and this newness and this giddiness and this, kind of embarrassment about the whole thing too, as you're getting to know somebody and do new things with this person. But it gives way to something else, right? It gives way to other aspects of a relationship, which again are deeper, are more intimate, right? But that usually comes with some trials, right? And that's such a part of our classics, like the classic stories of humanity, or it's like there are the trials, right, that a person goes through, and through that process you end up discovering what your meaning is. And it's not that the things at the beginning had nothing to do with it. They had everything to do with it, right? And very often they were the catalyst. The most, as far as I understand, the most popular story structure that exists is a story called Man in Whole. And basically it starts out, hey, here's our main character, and this is their life. It looks pretty great. They're doing pretty well. Things are going pretty good. Boom. Something fucking happens. Man in Whole. Your whole life just gets upturned, disrupted, shattered in some way, and now we climb our way back out, because we're not interested in watching a story about somebody whose life is just that, hey, things are easy breezy, let's just go on day to day routine, it's all good. We don't want to watch that. We're not interested in that story, right? It's a part of the story. It's an important part of the story, because it gives us some context to things. It gives us a richer backdrop for these trials to occur, right? But coming back to this quote, can we pull that quote up again? I know it's not a very long one, but it's, man can only find meaning for his existence in something outside himself. Okay, and I hope everyone can forgive Viktor Frankl's language in this one. Just a person, a human being. Because I think that as much as this conversation and the things we've been getting to, it's all been fantastic, but I feel this sort of call to get back to this quote and what he's saying. And I think that really one of the big aspects of that quote is, again, that thing of outside himself, outside yourself. Because, you said like, hey, I'd like to see if he has some kind of quote that actually is somewhat directive, right? Because he says a lot of things of like, well, it's every person's quest to find their meaning, to go out and look for it. And says, but you said specifically, does he have something where he gives us a little bit of direction? And this was the one that we found, which is it's outside of yourself. And another quote that I found of his through this process is, he said, "The meaning of my life is to help others find theirs." So I just thought, it's like, okay, so here he is describing in the language, meaning, right? The meaning of his life and and how that is in relationship to the world, right? Because it is. That's where so much of what your meaning is. It all comes down to your relationship to the world and how you want to be in a relationship to and with the world. It doesn't exist as a standalone unit, right? It's not your meaning unto yourself. It's your meaning unto the world in a certain respect. So using that I'm thinking of this almost as a template and something that I was like, that would be a good thing to just spend some time with. Just being like, the meaning of my life is to help what? Right? And see what comes up out of that. What comes up out of like, okay, this isn't about you. This is about what are you helping? How are you helping something that's, again, it's bigger than you? And I'm even thinking about this in respect to what I've learned about great acting, which is, well, yeah, put your attention on the other person. Put your attention on the other people that you're in the scene with and take the attention off of yourself, because the other people are going to tell you how to do how you're going to perform the scene. In response to them, you're going to know what to do. And that not only are they going to tell you what to do, but they're actually going to take you further than you could take yourself. Right? Which is another big thing that I learned about acting, which is that instead of trying to put all that trust and faith in just, not to have trust and faith in yourself, but that it's not a closed circuit, right? That trusted faith in yourself is an open circuit that ties in with others around you. And that when you open that and extend that circuit to connect with another person or cause or whatever that thing is that only you can answer, has a meaning to you, that can take you places that you couldn't even imagine taking yourself. So, love the parallels that are coming up out of this one right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here. Well, to go to acting is a great example of, so many things here. Because acting, if you're going to do acting, it's really so much about what is outward. And if you get too focused on yourself, it's not going to work. You'll never be able to perform a great performance if it's all about you. And you got to find ways to put your attention and energy outward. I've been working with someone who's an actor right now, and we were talking about objective, and I was like, their performances were pretty good, but there's like nothing kind of captivating and moving about it. And like, it was just kind of like, yeah, like emotionally available, like it's natural, it's like a lot of things that kind of seem to work, but it's like I was looking at it, I'm like, well, what's your objective? Well, they didn't have an objective. And they're like, oh, because I want to feel this. And I'm like, it's not an objective. Like, you want to feel this. Like, I want to tell them how I feel. I want to do this or whatever. It's like, that's not an objective. That's some fucking self bullshit. Like, you're talking about what you're trying to get. And like, you're in a scene with another person. Like, it's not and so we did this exercise, and I said, listen, this is how because it's a screenwriting thing, but I've looked at objective a lot as an actor, but I was like, well, let's try because they couldn't get it. They couldn't get what an objective was. So I was like, let me explain this in the way that a screenwriter has to write a character. In a scene or a movie, I need to create an arc. There has to be change. Otherwise, if there's no change, it's just a bunch of bullshit. And that's a lot of the, unfortunately, that's a lot of the content we're seeing right now. We're seeing this bullshit content where there is no change because the characters, they don't go anywhere. They don't change. They don't evolve. They don't do anything. And it's garbage and it doesn't impact us. Sometimes it looks good. Sometimes the action sequences and the flashy things that are happening, the pretty people, it all looks really nice, but like it's garbage. You know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, here's the rule. How are they feeling? How's the other character or characters feeling, thinking, and behaving at the start of this scene? And how do you want them to be feeling, thinking, and behaving by the end of this scene? And you're going to start to find objective in that, because now it becomes about, and so this actor would come back and say, like, so what are they feeling? And then they would tell me some things. I was like, that's how you're feeling. What are they feeling? Okay, oh, they're feeling this. Okay, what are they thinking? And he'd say some feeling stuff. I mean, that's what they're feeling. What are they thinking? What are they thinking? What can you identify that they're thinking? Oh, well, this. And it's like, how are they behaving? And, he was having trouble because it's all about him. And this eventually, when you start looking outwards, like, oh, well, they got their heads hanging down. They're shaking. They're doing this. Okay, good. Now you're starting to look at them and you're starting to see what they're doing. Now you have cues. Because now, as you start to act and you start to have an objective, you can see if their behavior is changing. You can see if their thinking is changing by the way they're talking, the way they're responding. You can see if their feelings are changing. This is change. You're causing an impact in the world. All of a sudden, the performance fucking comes right to life. Things start happening. They start having emotional responses. It's all, it's like Meisner, right? It's the same idea, right? It's like this reacting and responding to things that are happening in front of you because you're paying attention outward. And I think purpose is very much like this, we talk about it in acting. We talk about it like, what's the objective? This is something you do in acting school. You go, what's the character's objective? But it's like, really, what are you saying? You're saying, in a sense, what's their purpose in this scene? What are they trying to do? And I think you can go into a bunch of different things. You can talk about tactics. You can talk about all these other things. But at the end of the day, you're there for a reason, and in this particular scene, the actor identified, well, at the beginning of this scene, they're hopeless, and I want to give them hope, and I want to give them optimism, and I want to give them belief that this is possible, because basically they're talking about somebody that they think's going to die, and everybody thinks this person's going to die, and they think they're not going to make it, and he realized, okay, the job is here. I need to be strong for them and teach and show them and inspire them and get them to believe that he can live, that this person in the hospital, it is possible. And that they don't have to be so hopeless. They can have hope. And by the end of the scene, it creates this very moving experience. And it's all kind of written into the context. Everything's kind of there. If you just look for it, it's very obvious. But the thing is, you have to be able to see that. And if you can see that as an actor and you can focus on putting your attention towards that, a lot of your acting takes care of itself. A lot of like what you're doing, what you're up to, how you're connecting with them, it all answers those questions. And that's what I think like purpose does for us in our lives. It answers questions to things that we find very complex. We don't know how to answer them. Like, what do I do right now? Well, what's your purpose? What impact are you trying to create? What change are you trying to make in the world? And so, something I'm working on right now is like, okay, well, if I because I coach and teach and do all that, but I think a lot of it comes back. I always think, well, a lot of this just comes back to when I was 15 or 16 years old. And it's like, what would I teach and share and mentor and guide myself at that age? If I could come along right now and I could come back and I could be like a mentor, teacher, guide for myself at that age, what would I do? And how would I help? And I would try to encourage and inspire and get them to take action on the things that they care about. And I would tell them that if they made a mistake, that it's okay. Like, what did you learn? How are we going to apply this to move it forward? And also one thing about filmmaking, I'm just realizing this now as I'm speaking, Evan, is filmmaking. I think the reason why I liked it so much was it brought people together. And I fucking love that. I loved that because the first film I ever made, I grabbed my friend's mom's camera and then got all my friends to come together to make a film. And we all fucking loved it. And everyone still talks about it to this day. And it's like, because everybody came together to do something that was cool and fun, and we created it, and it was just imagination, just boom, like into reality. And to me, I want to give everybody that gift. I think that's why I'm always trying to teach people to make movies and write scripts and use story and whatever they're doing, even if it's in their marketing or their website or whatever they're doing. I'm always like, what's the narrative? What's the story? What are we bringing to life here? You know, and I think part of it is that I get inspired by the creativity because I love bringing the internal world into manifesting it into the external. I think I find great joy in that. But I also think there's something about this which is like, because imagination and that brings people together, because people can get behind vision. So I think like the reason why I talk about vision so much on this podcast, I'm actually just realizing this now, is because vision is one way that I found how to get people to put aside all their bullshit and work together. And it didn't matter where they came from in the world. Man, at one point with my project, we had 120 plus people working on the same project together. We had people from all over, like, you know, and they couldn't be much more different, some of them. But we all worked together because we all had this common goal, and we all were just trying to make it. And we were making this independent project, and everybody believed in it. And I fucking loved that. And so like, I think what I was not seeing at the time was the true purpose was the fact that everybody could come together and make something. And also there was this other kind of thing, and I didn't give it as much attention when I was younger, but I would tell myself today, give this more attention. I wanted to inspire everybody to make their own films. I wanted everybody to go and like, let's make this, but let's keep making it. Like, what's your idea? What's your thought? You know? And I would have like a PA, which is, by the way, somebody who's like, you know, just the littlest person on set, right? In positionally. And I would say, you know, I'd say, come to me, tell me your idea. If you have an idea, if you see something, you know, I'll hear it out. I might not use it, but I'll hear it out. And people felt like they contributed. They felt like they were a part of it because everybody was. And they didn't just do it because, oh, I know I want to make it, like I want to make a good in with Brandon or the guys or whatever who are running this. They did it because they really thought, hey, like, what if we did this? It was a great idea. Let's fucking do that. You know, people care. And yeah, so it really is. It's like, I think I'm talking about the spinning plates earlier, right? The spinning plates were all about me. I needed to have the good girlfriend. I needed to have the money. I needed to have the success, the recognition, and I was spinning those plates. And that was the ego, and that was the false sense of purpose. None of that was real. It was like the actor who's talking about, I want to feel this way. I'm doing the scene because I want to feel this way. That's all bullshit. You will feel a certain way if you start to give and you start to contribute, but it's not what it's about. And I understand how we get confused now. Like, we get confused because we like that feeling and we want more of that feeling. So like, yeah, it's about that feeling. It's not really about that feeling. That feeling's actually a byproduct of purpose. Purpose gives you that feeling. But if you start pursuing that feeling, the feeling escapes you. The plates come down and they crash. And you actually have to go back to the purpose. So you know what I would tell myself now is, I'm thinking about it at 30, when I was kind of going through that, I would have said, stop focusing on you and how you feel. Start focusing on what you're trying to do here in the world. Because yeah, some things are falling apart in your life, but that actually doesn't take away from what you're trying to do. That actually is going to add to what you're doing. Because some of those people who you're working with maybe aren't the right people to be working with. And maybe they're there for the wrong reasons. And maybe you brought them into your life for the wrong reasons. Because maybe they give you something that you think feels good, like some kind of feeling of love or acceptance that you're actually looking for. And you don't need that from them. Focus on the purpose. Focus on what you're building, on what you're creating. And I could have saved myself a whole lot of fucking heartache, you know, but I'm seeing that now because I think this is the thing about purpose, right? And I'm like, whatever, man. If I find purpose now in my life and it took me this long, so be it. I mean, because the alternative is I could go through my whole life and never pursue purpose. And I don't even know what that life looks like, you know? But yeah, this is, you know, I'm starting to realize, yeah, it's so much like acting though, man. Get the attention off yourself and put it outward. What are you doing? What are you trying to move and create out here?
Mm-hmm. And even with other art forms too, it's what little I know of because I'm not super intimate with a lot of other art forms, but music would probably be the next one. And it's, so you have to listen to where the music is taking you, right? It's not just like, I don't really give a shit how gnarly and technical of a guitar solo that you can do if it's just sort of standing out on its own. It's not really with the rest of the music. It's not right for the rest of the music. Like there's and even when you're just playing lead in the guitar world, right? It's like it's not just about all kinds of technical tricks that you can do. It's about the music. Like it's about that connection from one note to the next note and the story that tells, the feeling that carries with it, and whether you're really connected to it. Like it's that's really where you go into the realm of art, where it goes beyond just being a technician, and you go into the realm of art, is that it steps into a different place. The attention is placed elsewhere. The attention isn't on the technique of it. The attention isn't on the egotism of what I can do. The attention is 100% completely on the thing that is being done and what is right for that thing, how you fit with that thing. I remember I'm remembering years and years ago, I used to get season tickets to the Vancouver Playhouse. And this one season, they put on this play called Dangerous Corner. And I can't remember who the writer was, an English writer. And I was just blown away by this story, and the actors just, I thought were phenomenal. And I used to go on nights where it was, because it was like a student thing, and so they would do a talk back. Most of the actors would usually all come out at the end, and they would answer questions and things, and it was kind of an ensemble piece, right? There was 8 people who were like on stage pretty much all the time, like throughout the whole thing, because it all occurs in one location. So everyone's just kind of hanging around in the same place. And I was just like, whoa. And I said, how do you sort of perform in that when there's all of these people going on? Because in my mind, I was still this acting student who was thinking about stuff like, how do you know how to play your objective here when there's so many people that are going on? My mind on the technique, right? And the actress who answered the question, she just said, well, she gave some practical advice, but the thing I really remember about it is she said, well, she's like, I just need to know how I fit with everyone else. She's like, once I know how I fit and with everyone else, then I kind of know who the hot person is every moment in the scene for me, right? Because it moves around, and I was like, oh wow, that's so great. But it's like, I think that again, that's part of coming back to this quote. It's like, it's that fit. How do you fit with the rest of us? How do you fit? And that doesn't mean that absolutely 100% does not mean conforming or just doing what other people want you to do. Not in the slightest. It's still very much about understanding what those gifts are that you have, what that passion is that you have, and how is that something that helps other people? How can you give that to other people? And I think it was, I don't know if it was Parker Palmer who actually said this or not, but another great quote said, your purpose is where your great passion meets the world's great need. Something like that. Might have gotten a few words wrong there, but something along those lines. And it's, again, pointing to this thing of like, it's relational. It's always relational. You know, like the world can't tell you what it is, but the world will tell you what it is. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's a bit of a paradox, I guess. Is it a paradox, or it's like, it seems contradictory, but it's like, you know, the world can't tell you what it is. You only you can know what it is, but at the same time, it is your engagement and relationship with the world that is still in some way going to tell you what the meaning of your life is.
It's something that I'm kind of realizing is that it's how we make sense of the world that we find purpose. Because, you know, and I don't always think we're in a place in our lives where we can really see our purpose, because, I mean, maybe we can, but a lot of it comes down to like, what do you believe? Like, what do you think matters? You know, and where do you, like, what do you think life is? You know, like, I think you have to answer some of these questions, because like, if you think life is just you live and then you die and like nothing matters and it's all nihilism and whatever, I mean, I don't think nihilists live joyful, happy lives. I think that they live very satiated lives, but I think they're doomed. I think and I think we have plenty of evidence of that nihilism is a temporary belief system that we sometimes adopt to navigate through the nothingness of not having anything to connect to at all. And I think it's an okay place to visit every now and then, just to check it out and see what it's like. Like, how's this party? But like, I don't think you should hang out there too long. Oh, God. You know, like I think ultimately the consequences of it catch up. It's a crack den of a party. It's the worst place you can be. It's like, it's a nightmare, you know? And I think ultimately, even nihilists who even say they're nihilists, ultimately, if you listen to them talk long enough, you realize they're not nihilists at all, even if they identify as that, because at some point you find meaning and purpose and connection in something. And you know, something that used to drive me when I was younger is to think, well, you know, when you get older, I think you should be able to tell a bunch of good memories of your life. I think that's really important. And you know, whether that's true or not, I don't know. I mean, that was just something, it was a belief I clung on to and hung on to for a while. But what it did was it caused me to do some pretty cool things. I have lots to talk about. I have many stories to share, because part of my youth was like, well, let's just fucking go for it. Because like, at the very least, this will be a story to tell one day. So let's try it. Let's dare it. Let's do it. And it led to some pretty cool things, you know, and I don't think that that's the end all be all answer by any means, but I do think it helped me to start to find more answers. And I think a lot of purpose is about that. The other thing too is like, you know, and like, I'm not saying that I have the way, I just have my way, but I think people expressing their vision, like this incredible imagination and these ideas they have in their head, and to be able to bring that into reality in some form. I found that movies are a cool way to do it, but I mean, if you wanted to like build architecture, I suppose that could be a way, or you want to play music, maybe like paint something, I don't know, dance it out, whatever. But the fact that you could bring something inside of you and then show us in the world, to me, that's such a fucking magical thing. I'm just like, life has to be something about that, to me at least. So there's something in that. So this is like part of my belief system. So have memories when you're older to talk about. Something inside of you needs to come out and be shared with the world. That's an important part of this process. I'd rather be fucking happy and joyful and fulfilled and feel love than to not feel any of those things. So that definitely, let's throw that in the fucking pot of this stew, right? So it's like, then you start to have some fucking ingredients to work with. Then you can start to figure out, well, what do I want to do with that shit? And it's like, well, I'll make some films. You know what? I'll teach people how to make some films. And you know what? Actually, sometimes it's not just about making the film. It's actually about writing the script. So let's write the script. And you know what? It is pretty fun to fucking act and play the part. So let's try that too. And then some of the stuff you find, you try it out and it's not really for you, but it's not that you didn't enjoy it, but it might not be the thing you really like to do. And I think this is where a lot of us find our art, you know? And so for the artists out there that are lacking purpose, like it's just your form of expression. So if you're an actor and that's what you love to do, don't look at it as purposeless. It's fucking so purposeful because that's what you love to do. So if you love to do it that way, and that's what's going to bring your internal world out to this world, I would say fucking A, go do more of that. And actually, not only is it vitally important to the world and to your life, but it is something inside of you needs to come out. And if that's the best way you have to do it, then do it that way. And if you find a better way along the way, then go and do it that way. But whatever, you know. Evan, this has been such a great talk, and I don't know if you have anything to add to it, but I'm thinking we are getting to that witching hour. Yeah. So maybe wrap this up. This has been fun though. But you know what I think the thing is like, I do think purpose goes through stages of evolution and maturity. And, you know, there is a relationship, as you mentioned, to it, where both the internal, our experience matters, and what we're doing in the external matters. But I don't think it's always just one or the other. I don't think we should look at it as black and white. I think both matter, because I don't think you should just be out there. I'm just going to give and give and give and give and not get anything back, because I think there is a give and take about this. No one's expecting you to go out in the world and just give up everything in yourself and just suffer your whole life to give everyone else something. Like I think if we love you, which ultimately we do, you know, and I'm talking about all of humanity, like really people love you because when they see themselves in you, they love and they love, you know, this is whatever. But the point is that I want you to be happy too. And if you can bring me happiness and joy and purpose, then that's fucking amazing. Like, I'm definitely going to want to be around you more, but I also want to give you the same thing. And I don't think that you should be ashamed to ask for that. But also, I think you'll sour our relationship if you make it all about what you get and nothing about what you give. But I also think you can do the same by just making it all about what you give and not what you can get too, because I think some of it's for you. I think this is a pie that we all want to share. I think it's something, you know, we're at the birthday party. I want to give you a slice of my birthday cake. I don't want to eat the whole thing myself. You're here to have a slice with me. You know what I'm saying? So I think like there's an element to, you know, why are we all here matters just as much as like, why am I here? And not too much one or the other, but they all add up. So anyway, here's the beer. Okay, this is Bowen Island Brewing Company. It's called the Coastline Pale Ale. I like it because it's cheap. It's a very inexpensive beer, surprisingly so. I picked this up for which feels like nothing. But it's been a pretty solid pale ale. It's been pretty good. It's I've been enjoying it. I don't know. I mean, it's nice. You know, it's nice when people just knock out a nice, cheap, solid beer. So I'm happy about that. And I don't think it tastes cheap, but it was cheap. And I appreciate that. And I share that with the world.
Bowen Island is a brewing company. They've got a long tradition of good, solid, local, cheap beer. And it's good. It's got like it's definitely more of a mouthful for a pale ale than you might expect. But you know, there's lots of, I'm just like looking at it and like they got lots of hops action in on this one. Where did I just see that? It was like they got a ton of hops in this bad boy. Like hops: Galena, Nugget, Willamette, Apollo, and Cascade. It's out of control. So hey, man, you're getting your hops worth.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So, all right, let's wrap this one. The hour is getting late. You know, I'll just, from what you were saying and just reflecting back on this conversation, inspired by Viktor Frankl. Thank you for being with us this evening, sir. to inspire this conversation. And it's really, I'm coming back to this word of, these words, relationship and intimacy, seem to be really big words for me in this conversation, where, meaning is in so many ways, it's like, it's our relationship to everything all bottled up in meaning, right? Our relationship to ourselves, our relationship to the world, our relationship to others, and everything that's in between all of those things, which is just probably incalculable. Is that the right word? Incalculable. It's probably impossible for us to fathom necessarily all of those things, but it's about our relationship to everything. And what and how do we want those relationships to be? And that it's not just about ourselves. It's about our connection to everyone and everything else. And I mean, there's, Viktor Frankl was a psychotherapist. I mean, he wrote a book. He's an artist in his own right, but he isn't explicitly what you would consider an artist. But he's talking very deeply about what artists do. What an artist is engaged with, and it's very much entrenched in these things about meaning and about purpose and about that connection, right? It's not just about the artist, doing, I really do. I think that we've glorified too much in our culture and our society about just being this whole thing of like, I don't need anybody, kind of standalone, types of people. It's just like the self-empowerment thing. And it's just like, hey, don't get me wrong. Like there's like being empowered, is great. But when it's not connected to the world in a meaningful way, that's truly in some ways is about something more than yourself, then it's just like, I think that it's really can get really ugly, and there's a lot of that going on. And it's like, we need to remember that, like, hey, it's not just about us. And in fact, life's a hell of a lot better if it's not just about you, right? If it's not just about me, but if it's about us all together, and putting our attention maybe a little bit off of ourselves is probably a good thing.
Yeah, I went on my whole thing about, like, have your piece of cake too. I do think that's important. And I don't necessarily think that's what this conversation is about, but I do think it's necessary to mention. I do think that, it's okay to be motivated because you like something and you enjoy it, and, and maybe you love it or whatever. It feels good or it's fun. I do think that there's an element of, I like it. That's why I do it. And sometimes I think, at least temporarily, that's enough. I think especially in the early stages of something, I don't know why I'm doing it. I just like it. It's fun. I like it. It's cool, and I think about it and I'm passionate about it and whatever. And you have these great feelings towards something. I think initially all of that is great to get you started with something, but eventually something is going to have to fill the space that does not fill, because like you said, novelty, I think novelty initially, we just like it. It feels good and we enjoy it, but novelty wears off eventually. And when it wears off, then we're faced with the reality of actual purpose. And that becomes more about, what are we doing out here and for whom and for what and all of that. One thing I would say too is, like, I don't think we're here to help everybody. I don't think you're here to save the world, in the sense that you might save the world, but you won't do it because you're trying to. I would say that you're here to help maybe one person, maybe a group of people, but it's a very small part that you're here to do. And that group may help more people, and that will be your legacy. But I think if you go out to try and please everybody and help the whole world, you are, for lack of a better word, you're fucked. I just don't think it's going to work out for you. I think you need to help the specific person or group of people or whatever that you can help, and that will do what's necessary. That is your work, and your work will have legacy and will expand beyond you. And you need to have faith and trust in that. And also it helps you don't have to take on so much, because I think if you take on too much, I don't think you'll do anything at all. And, and they say in marketing, that you should be talking to 1 to 3 people, specific people, and you should know what they're like, So really there's a kind of person, and I think you should kind of identify that kind of person you're trying to help, and you're going to help them and everyone like them. And anyone who's not like them, don't try and help them. Not that you help them if you can, but don't try to be like, I'm going to help them too, because you'll dilute the message to the people that you actually need to help. And, if you want to have a successful business, or you want to I don't know everything about it, but one thing I am good at is sales. And one thing about sales is that you can sell, if you're talking to the right person, you can sell to anybody. If you're talking to the wrong person, and by I'm talking to the wrong person, what I'm saying is somebody that doesn't want what you have. You have to be sleazy. You have to do all this bullshit. And that's what people, when they hear sales, they don't want to do sales. Because it's because you're trying to sell to someone that doesn't want what you are offering. So trying to sell them, either you're going to sell them and you're going to sell them something they don't want or need or whatever, and you're convinced they do, and they're not. But if someone is looking for something and you happen to have it, nothing feels better than, yes, let me share with you what I have. Seeing that you want it and need it and I can help you, let me help you. That feels great. Whereas someone's like, I don't really know if I want or need that. And you're like, you need it, I'm telling you. It's like, well, what the fuck? You're trying to jam it down their throat now. And, but there are people that need you. This is my point. Let me bring it all back around. Your purpose is needed by certain people, but not by everybody. So if you find the people that it's needed for, you're going to find great connection to the purpose. If you keep trying to give your purpose to people that don't really need it, you might think that your purpose is meaningless, it doesn't matter, but it's just no, you're just trying to give it to the people that don't actually need what you're offering. An example, maybe a silly example, but the most simplest one I can think of is that if you're in the desert and you have no water and I have water, then I'm a pretty good ally and good friend right now for you. But if we're in the middle of an oasis and I'm trying to sell you water, it's you don't need my water. Get it anywhere. It just doesn't matter, right? So I'm not really helping you. I'm not giving you something you don't have. So when you look at purpose, also look at where's the best place to give it, to whom to give it to what to give it to. And I think that's a big part of this whole thing we're talking about as well. And sometimes that might help you figure out where you're meant to be in this world and what you're meant to do. Because I think sometimes we go, well, I don't know where I want to be or what I want to do, or those types of questions start to get answered when you start to figure out who would I be good at helping, and then you can put yourself in that environment. And one more analogy, kind of like a plant in a garden or something. You need the right things to survive, and not only to survive, but to flourish. And if you're a plant that needs an abundance of water, and we put you in the desert, you might die, right? Just like if you're a cacti and we put you in this oasis, wetlands, you probably die. Because it's not your environment. It's not the right place for you to thrive and survive. It's not where you will flourish. And so you need to identify, hey, this environment, it might be good for other people, isn't good for me. Or this environment isn't good for everyone else, but hey, I love being here. This is great for me. So that's where you're needed, right? And maybe that helps. I don't know. But this is something I'm working out. Evan's working out. And thanks for being here.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.